Happy President's Day, and welcome to the February City Club Missoula Forum. I am Susan Hay Patrick, Chair of the Board of City Club Missoula, and it's great to see so many of you here on President's Day, even though I know it's a work holiday for many of us, and also because there are many awesome films at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, so I hope you all go later to see some movies. First, thank yous. Thanks to all of our sponsors for the opportunity to provide a community platform for civil discourse. More about that in a minute. Thank you, Blackfoot, for your continued support and partnership, helping to provide forum access to 60 University of Montana students in 2020. And do we have students with us today? Must be a holiday for them, too. But we are grateful to, especially to Dr. Sarah Rinfrey at the university for continuing to provide students with the opportunity to join and engage with City Club. We'd also like to highlight some of our new sponsors, Stockman Bank, Clearwater Credit Union, and the Missoula Organization of Realtors. Thank you for making these forums possible. I also want to announce and thank the members of the City Club's 2020 Board of Directors. Vice Chair Aaron Pahan with the City's Office of Housing and Community Development, Treasurer Robert Giblin with the Downtown Missoula Partnership, Secretary Dave Peppinger with SG Long, our immediate past chair Peggy Coor, communicator extraordinaire who is in sunny California today. Also our board members Gwen Lankford with Sapphire Strategies, Julie Maloney with Morrison Merrily, Brett Rosenberg with Treeline Strategy, Heidi Sterrett with Missoula Broadcasting, and Leslie Von Eschen with Cost Care. And finally, even though he is off on a yurt ski adventure, thanks to our City Club coordinator, Eric Legvold, who does such a great job for us. It is no small task, logistically, to get this thing done. So please remember to like us on Facebook. Visit our website. You can find all things City Club at cityclubmissoula.com. We are actively seeking and processing 2020 membership renewals, sponsorship renewals and membership renewals, and we're providing our 2020 membership at the discounted price of $35 for individuals until the March 9 forum. So please join or renew. Speaking of the March 9 forum, it is the state of our schools, 21st century learning in K-12 classrooms in Missoula and online across Montana. It features Missoula County Public Schools Superintendent Rob Watson and Dean and Professor Adria Lawrence of the Phyllis J. Washington College of Education at the University of Montana. A couple of logistical things. There are name tags on your table, so if you don't come with a name tag affixed to you, please fill one out. Members of the media, we ask that you hold your questions until after the forum, at which time our panelists will be available to speak with you. And speaking of the media, we are, as always, grateful to MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television, for filming every City Club Missoula forum as part of its Media Assistance Grants Program to nonprofit organizations. They're broadcast within 24 to 48 hours from today, and MCAT serves the Missoula area on cable channels 189 and 190. We would like to remind everyone that City Club's mission is to bring together people to inform and inspire citizens on issues vital to the Missoula community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. At our recent board retreat, we agreed that we should probably elaborate on that mission at every forum so that people better understand our purpose and our format. This came up over discussion at the retreat over whether we should make every forum a point-counterpoint, with somebody on pro an issue and someone con the issue. And given the topics that we present at City Club, that format rarely makes sense. It does sometimes, but most of the time not. For example, here are some of our recent topics, enrollment. Could we have found a speaker who thinks that increasing university enrollment is a bad idea? Early childhood development. Was somebody really going to argue that we shouldn't do whatever we can to prepare kids for kindergarten? Or the role of the arts in Missoula, or cybersecurity, or human trafficking? Who would have spoken in favor of hacking or human trafficking? Or last month's forum on how Missoula is preparing for and adjusting to climate change. It wasn't a forum about what causes climate change. It was a forum about steps local government is taking to adjust to climate change. It was difficult to imagine someone arguing against that kind of civic preparation. Anyway, City Club in Missoula and around the country is at its best when we fulfill our mandate to present ideas. And the support of or opposition to or the dissection of and questions about those ideas come from you, the attendees, during table talk. That's the hallmark of City Club, both here and around the country, where people of diverse viewpoints and differing ideas sit around a table and debate and discuss the ideas they've heard, unpack and poke at those ideas in a civil manner, and hopefully find enough common ground to develop a civil question from the table. So it's not your question, it's a common question. That format encourages civil discourse of often provocative or controversial ideas and fosters the finding of common ground with people with whom we might disagree profoundly. And that's okay. What's not okay is being uncivil or disruptive or malicious or belligerent or disrespectful and rude to the speakers or your table mates. The topic of today's forum is something that provokes strong feelings, both pro and con. But City Club is an island of civility in a very rancorous and polarized world. Our mission is to shine a light on issues and ideas and create an atmosphere where people of differing opinions can share those opinions freely, respectfully, and without fear of threat or personal attack. You may note the presence of law enforcement today. That's because we've been told that there are some people determined to disrupt today's forum at any cost. So if that's your purpose, this isn't the place for you. And I just want to give you a heads up that if you're here to disrupt or insult our speakers, we just can't tolerate that. So if you become disruptive, you'll be asked first to leave, well, by me, because we paid to rent this space, then by DoubleTree staff representing the property owners. And should you refuse to do so, you will be escorted from the room by law enforcement and likely charged with criminal trespassing. That's not the outcome we want, but it is the outcome we are prepared to enforce. So I'll be back again in about a half hour to remind you of the table talk rules. But now, it's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers on the Riverfront Triangle Development. First, Jim McLeod. Jim is a principal and has been a managing partner of Farran Realty Partners since its inception in 2003. He has over 25 years of experience in residential development, brokerage, and sales. Prior to starting Farran, Jim managed his family's 60-year-old residential brokerage firm and led the entitlement efforts on numerous large-scale resort and golf projects in Montana. He's a past board member of Special Olympics Montana, the Downtown Master Plan Committee. He served with me on the plan that developed Reaching Home, Missoula's 10-year plan to end homelessness. He currently serves on the Tourism Business Improvement District and the University of Montana Business Advisory Council. He has a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Montana. Nick Checota is the founder, owner, and president of Logjam Presents, an entertainment promotion and production company headquartered here in Missoula. He owns and operates 3 concert venues in Missoula, the Kettle House Amphitheater, the Wilma, and the Top Hat Lounge, which includes a full-service restaurant, it says in your bio. It's not the same after you took shrimp and grits off the menu, I'm just saying. Thank you. Let MCAT record that. Nick's company has recently expanded into the Bozeman market, taking over booking for the Rialto Theater and constructing a new ground-up facility named The Elm. Prior to launching Logjam Presents, Nick owned and operated Landmark Healthcare Companies, a real estate company focused on developing and owning medical facilities around the United States. He started his career as a business strategy consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Electronic Data Systems, working with Fortune 50 companies regarding strategic planning and mergers and acquisitions. He has an MBA in finance from Vanderbilt University and an undergraduate in finance and economics from Bentley University. So please join me in welcoming Jim and Nick.
Can everyone hear me? I'm going to run off a laptop here because I can't quite see the screen, so I'm going to run both at the same time. My goal today is to talk a little bit about the Drift project. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of an overview on who Logjam is and a bit of statistics on our company, and then I'll jump right into the project itself, talk about it in the context of the larger Riverfront Triangle Development, and then I'm going to go through the design of the project, and then I'm going to conclude with probably a piece that everybody wants to talk about a little bit, which is the TIF component of the project. Can I grab that? Sure. I'm going to start with some background on Logjam. As was mentioned, we operate six. We own five and operate one under a long-term agreement with the Rialto folks in Bozeman. But as was said earlier, we own the Wilma, Top Hat, Kettle House Amphitheater. We're under construction on the Elm in Bozeman and operate the Rialto. To give you a sense of our company, we have about 210 employees currently in Missoula. Again, scope and size, we have about a $3.3 million payroll in the Missoula market. And a big issue I hear a lot, and a lot of questions are these jobs good jobs? Is the hospitality industry good jobs? To give you a sense on us, our average annual wage is about $14.22, which is about 65% above the current minimum wage. And please note that doesn't include tips. When you factor in the tips, a lot of our wage would jump up $4 or $5 an hour overall. We do about 500 events downtown a year, of which 225 are generally local shows, and the remainder are what I'd call ticketed shows, national touring artists that come through that we offer a formal ticket on. We did in 2020, we anticipate we'll do about 225,000 tickets in the Missoula market. And that's a pretty interesting number if you think about Missoula. When you look at our rankings nationally, in this smaller community of Missoula, Montana, Logjam is currently ranked as the 83rd largest promoter in the world. The Kettle House Amphitheater, with a 4-month season, was ranked as the 45th largest ticket volume amphitheater in the world. And this is including the entire world, places like London, Oslo, New York, LA, so we're in that range with the amphitheater. The Wilma is 63rd largest ticket volumes in the world, and the Top Hat is actually 99 in the world, which is just, again, for us, it shows the support that music garnishes in the Missoula community, and it's quite amazing. Of those 225,000 tickets, about 42% of them come from what we define as out of market, more than 200 miles away from Missoula. So in addition to Missoulians taking in the concerts, we see a lot of people traveling in nationally and regionally to our concerts, which I think for hotels like the DoubleTree and other hotels, it's been great for them, particularly on the amphitheater shows. Most of these hotels are sold out downtown generally. And it is, as we'll talk about later, one of the motivations for us to explore and get into the hotel business is we feel it's very complementary to the things that we do in our venue side of our business. background, we've invested about $10 million of capital into the Missoula market in the renovation of the Top Hat, in the renovation of the Wilma, in the construction of the Kettle House Amphitheater, and for those that don't know, we were the original developer on Plunk in the old Army-Navy building. Of those projects, we've increased the property tax base on those buildings by over $100,000. So they went from roughly $65,000 to about $180,000 of taxable property tax on those properties. One thing that's very important to us is our involvement in the community, and if some of you work for not-for-profits, particularly in the arts sector, you know we're very active. Since in the last 3 to 4 years, we've donated about $1.3 million into the arts community. A big lion's share of that going to the new Zootown Community Arts Center, which we're really proud of. If you haven't been there, I'd really suggest you go there. It's a phenomenal facility. Another big organization for us that's very important is getting arts back into the public schools, which we feel has really waned in recent years, so we support Spark in that initiative. And then a list of other arts-oriented organizations. In addition to arts, conservation, particularly given that we're on the Blackfoot River with our venue, is very important to us. So that's a little background on us. Let me get into the project itself. This map's a little, This map's a little hard to read from where you're at, but just to give people context of where the Riverfront Triangle is, for those that don't know, and where the drift is specifically, it's along at the corner of Orange and Front, and the two circles represent either a quarter-mile or a half-mile radius, so you can get a sense relative to where it is to the rest of downtown. The project is directly on the river. It's directly on the river trail system, and that's a big part. As you see when we get into the renderings itself, you'll see how much we've tried to integrate into that river trail system and how important that is to the project. What I have here is a diagram of the entire riverfront. The entire Riverfront Triangle project, and really we're looking at this, and Jim will talk about this a little bit more. We're looking at this in 4 phases, or 4 components, 2 or 3 phases. Phase 1 is the drift project that I'm going to talk about, and it's also going to include the portion also along the river directly adjacent to the drift project, which Jim is going to talk about. Future phases, which I described here as Parcel 3 and Parcel 4, are phases that the Farran Group will develop over time. They own all 3 of the parcels other than the parcel that we're building the drift on, and over time it is their intent to develop out those other 3 parcels. With respect to the drift itself, what you have here is really the corner of Orange and Front Street. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the actual building, but to give you a sense on the site plan, you have the hotel tower and the event center side by side. The event center located on the corner, directly on the corner of Orange and Front. And adjacent to that, and really physically attached to that, is what we call the tower component. It's not just a hotel. It's going to have residents in it. It's going to have food and beverage in it, and it's going to have a conference center component to it, a business and event center that's a little bit smaller than the larger event center. All of that sits on the hotel piece. All of this surrounded by, and when we get into the renderings, you'll really see it, all of this is surrounded by a lot of plaza and terrace space that integrates and interacts with the trail system. The project, again, we'll talk about a little bit more, but the project includes total improvements on Front Street, redoing the sewer lines, redoing the water, and also stormwater. It also includes a roundabout on the corner of Owen and Front, which is, if you look kind of past the hotel piece, it includes a plaza space in between the city-owned property and the property that the Farran Group owns. So it's a big project in that it encompasses both an event center, a hotel component, and a lot of outdoor plaza space. So what I did is created a quick stacking diagram so people could understand the project as it relates to all the different components, and ultimately when we talk about which components will be owned by the developer and which will be owned by the city, this diagram will help give you some context. The first two levels are parking. So if you start at the current parking lot that sits at the corner of Front and Orange, you'll notice that that's substantially lower than the Front Street and Orange Street grade. It's about 20 feet below that grade. So the first two levels of the project are two levels of parking. That essentially brings it up to grade at the corner of Front and Orange. So as you see here, we have 169 on the lowest level and 155 stalls on the upper level. This is one of two potential parking garages that we'll talk about. On the top of the parking is the event center, which is currently looked at as about an 80,000 to 90,000 square foot event center. The best example we can give you as a similar type of event center is the Anthem in Washington, D.C. It's a multi-purpose room that can do large banquets, can do trade shows, can do large concerts, can do Broadway plays, and it lets us really diversify outside of just music, but get into general entertainment that a lot of people have to travel to Spokane to currently see. On the tower component, you have the food hall, it's a food concept that we're looking on the first level that opens out onto the plaza space and the hotel lobby. On the second level, we have a 10,000 square foot conference center. And then we start getting into the rooms. We also have a fitness and spa area and a rooftop patio. Then the next several levels are rooms, and then the top three levels are condominium units, residential condominium units. This gives you a sense of the parking and how the overall site flows. As I showed you earlier, was the parking on the side closest to me is the parking under the hotel and event center. In addition to that, on the lot adjacent, the project that the Farran Group is going to be doing, there will be additional parking there, also two levels of parking. Obviously, those of us that operate in downtown Missoula, particularly on the Front Street, parking is always an issue, and it's something that we're trying to address with this project to the best of our ability, what we can fit on the site. You'll also see the plaza here related to the parking, and you'll enter on that roundabout is how you'll enter in to the parking structure, and you can go into either lot from that location. So really good flow and car management into the parking lot. You know, the design piece of this is really important to us. We've given a lot of thought. How do you interact with the river trail system? How do you interact with the plaza? How do you interact with the future developments that are going on in this site? How do you create a district? All of those factors play in as we looked at this project. So I'm going to walk people through a little bit of the look and feel and the overall design of the project here. So this is a view from the riverside, really emphasizing the event center piece. What you see on, technology. The piece closest to me is the event center component. As you can see, the whole thing sits on this platform. Again, remember, there's two levels of parking. So what's at grade at the Front Street level, when you're down at the River Trail level, is 2 grades above, or about a grade and a half above that, because the River Trail actually runs higher than the site itself. So you can see that we've decided to enclose the parking rather than having an open face parking. We've decided to enclose it and exhaust it, because I think from the River Trail, that's what we as a community are going to want to see. And then there's a lot of interaction of that plaza level into the River Trail system. But closest to me, you have the event center, and then adjacent to that, you have the first 2 levels, which is the food hall component, the lobby. Second level is the conference space. Third level starts the hotels. Then you have the hotels, and then the top of it is the condominium portion. I'm going to just run through some quick renderings so people can get a sense, but what we wanted to show you is, one of the components of this project is that we are responsible for redoing the River Trail system and all the connectivity to it. We're also responsible for the improvements on Front Street, the roundabout, and those improvements. And so we're working very closely with Parks and Rec to try to find a design that meets their needs, that we think meets the needs of the event center, which is a civic space and needs to be able to handle large crowds of people, the hotel, the food hall. All those components need to work together, so we're working closely with Parks and Rec on that. Here's really a bird's eye view of both the plaza and the connectivity down to the river trail system. One of the things that comes, oh yeah, thank you. You think I'd figure it out here. One of the things that you'll see is that opening next to the stair. And one of the goals here of Parks and Rec, and our goal, is to get bike connectivity to the north side, which has a bike trail. So we're using this as an opportunity to get the grade through the parking garage up into that trail system. The other thing is that no point on the river trail system is there ADA access. This will provide ADA access both from the garage but also from Front Street down to the river trail system. So those two components we were able to handle working through the parking deck. And then lots of outdoor seating, a lot of interactive space here. Another view of the river trail system and the plaza. Oh yeah, I'll let Jim do that. How about that? Now we're getting into the hotel side a little bit. And when we get into TIF, we'll talk about it. The event center, the parking structure will be owned by the city. The event center component will be owned by the city. The hotel component will be owned by the developer. I'm going to talk how the funds work, who's financing what, but those are the three main components that we're going to talk about when we get into that phase. Here's the hotel piece of the project. Here's the view along front. The big challenge to this project is there is no back door. On one side you have river, on one side you have orange, on one side you have plaza, and on one side you have front. We don't have an alley, you don't have a load-in area, so Front Street becomes our load-in, and it was a challenge to make that attractive, to make it so semis can work into that project, etc. Here's a view from the corner of Orange in front. That's the renderings. Let me talk a little bit about deal structure, and I'm going to move through this as quick as I can so we have time for Jim to talk, and then I'm sure we'll get into this more with the question and answer period. But what do we have there currently? We currently have a tax-exempt property that the city's owned for over 30 years that hasn't generated any tax revenue since the city's ownership. In our opinion, maybe not everybody's, but it's an underdeveloped and underutilized piece of property, really a mix of a dilapidated parking structure and a surface lot on the river. Poor connectivity to the trail system, the river trail system, and a street in the form of Front and Owen that is in need of improvements. Whether we do them as part of this project or otherwise, that area needs some improvements. Ownership structure, which is really the first step in understanding the financing of the project. So what happens is currently the city owns a piece of property. Us, Logjam, as the developer, will purchase that property from the city and make a payment to the city. The original deal documents before we took assignment of those agreements had a loan provision. We're not exercising that. We're going to purchase the property outright. So the city will take in the $2.3 million as part of the purchase price. The city will maintain ownership of the portion of the property that is under the river trail. So this has multiple lots. One of those lots is under the river trail. The city maintains ownership of that. The developer designs and constructs the entire project with private financing. So we'll put in our equity, we'll get our loans, we'll build the parking structure on behalf of the city, we'll build the event center, we'll build the tower hotel component, all the plaza space, and then we'll do that with bank loans and equity that we put in. On the conclusion of the construction of the project, the city will buy the event center and the parking structure. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in more detail, but those are what receive either revenue bonds or TIF financing. The hotel receives zero TIF financing, zero public money. Logjam then will lease back the event center and operate it. That event causes the event center now to be a taxable, subject to property taxes. If the city owned that event center, it would not be subject to property taxes, which is an important piece as we talk through the TIF financing. And then the city will also own and operate the parking structure. It'll generate revenue, and then it'll use that revenue, as I'll talk about, to finance the parking structure. So, couple points. No city general funds are utilized for the DRIFT project. This is all TIF, tax increment financing, or revenue bonds. No general funds are being used for the project. Funds to purchase the parking structure will be supported by parking operations, revenue from the garage. Funds to purchase the event center are supported by property taxes with incremental taxes, which we can talk about in the question and answer session, but property taxes within the TIF district. TIF funds are not, the TIF funds are not funding the improvements of the developer in that the hotel is not receiving any TIF funds, nor is the plaza. The TIF funds are going for the event center. The mechanics of how the city issues these revenue bonds, for people that don't know, what the city does is it raises funds through these 2 revenue bond issuances that they're going to do. These are private placement bonds, meaning banks or financial institutions or private individuals purchase these bonds. The city will use the bond proceeds to purchase the parking structure and the event center. So the city issues the bonds, they get the revenue. Once they sell them to a private institution, they use those proceeds to buy the 2 facilities. The debt service of the parking structure bond will be funded by the operations of the parking structure. Again, not general tax funds, but the revenue of that parking structure is what funds that parking structure bond. The debt service for the event center is funded by the incremental tax increase, which is 100% here because this was owned by the city and had no taxes for the last 30 years. So the taxes from that project fund the majority of the TIF bond. There is some other incremental funds coming from other projects that were already built in that TIF district, but the vast majority is self-funding from this project's taxes. So what are the key benefits in our last slide here, the key benefits in the Drift development? It's going to create 200-plus construction jobs, and according to our contractor, is worth about $47 million in estimated construction wages. Logjam will hire an additional 200 staff with an estimated payroll of another $3.3 million a year. We'll have a world-class event center in the city of Missoula that will attract the kinds of artists that we want to attract to this community, and bring and put us on the map from a touring standpoint with those artists. We estimate that the venue will generate about 28,000 attendees a month into downtown Missoula. You're getting Missoula as a community will have access to a 10,000 square foot dedicated conference center, which we desperately need downtown. This is one of the few large rooms that you can do events in, and it is capped at somewhere around 300 people. We feel this will be a development catalyst for the entire Riverfront Triangle Development, which, again, we can debate. We think is good for Missoula. The development and tax-exempt site that the city's been working on for 30 years. They've been trying to develop this project for over 30 years with numerous developers and haven't been able to do it. And the site, river trail, and road work is going to get major improvements to the infrastructure of this location.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the phase 2 of the project that Nick had shown up on a previous slide. First of all, I just want to talk a little bit about Farran. We're a Missoula-based real estate development firm. We develop properties throughout Montana. Since 2003, we've developed over 1,600 residential units, and we have another 900 units in pre-construction. Both my partner Pat's here. We're both, Pat went to school at Montana State. I went to school at the University of Montana, and we both grew up in Montana. So the phasing, what Nick had pulled up earlier, we've got 3 additional phases to the Drift. The first phase is the purple area that I'm going to talk about today. That's located between Front Street and the river. The second phase is kind of the red section, which is sandwiched between Broadway, Front Street, Orange, and Owen Street. And then the last phase that we'll do is sandwiched between Front Street and Owen and Broadway Street. So before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about our vision. It coincides with the downtown master plan. We want to provide a diverse mix of employment, shopping, lodging, entertainment, office, and residential options. We want to honor Missoula's beauty and history. We want to expand on the downtown core, and we want to stay original and stay authentic. The goal of the city and the individuals who have been working with Linda and her team on the downtown master plan was to create an opportunity that allows our residents to not only work downtown, but to also live downtown. And according to the draft version of the Missoula master plan update, downtown Missoula is expected to add between 300 and 700 residents over the next 10 years, just over 70,000 square feet of retail and 30,000 square feet of restaurant space over the next 2 to 5 years, I'm sorry, 50,000 and 120,000 square feet of up to 120,000 square feet of office space over the next 5 to 10 years, and 300 to 900 hotel rooms within the next 2 to 5 years. So I think what Nick talked about earlier and what I'm going to show you next, we're meeting those goals. So let's talk a little bit about how our vision coincides with the downtown master plan. Phase 1 will have 210 apartment homes. The unit mix will be made up of, and this is, the unit mix will be made up of studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. Some of the 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms will have dens, and we'll also have, on our main level, we'll have work-live options apartment homes. They'll range anywhere from 525 square feet to all the way up to 1,500 square feet. Our first level, which is kind of the red section, will be a mix of retail, residential, and residential units, all with 18-foot ceilings. And that's the type of construction we're using. We're going to go with 2 levels of podium above the parking structure and 5 levels of stick on up. So I think from an architectural design, it's going to have a really unique look to it. When you walk into some of these units and you have an 18-foot ceiling, you're going to be able to have lofts, and that's where you can have work-live options. This is just a rendering. Don't read too much into it. It's just, you know, we're just starting to look at some different concepts. But this is how some of the lofts would look on the main level. It also allows us to create over 13,000 square feet of vibrant retail and restaurant space and possibly a rooftop amenity. And these are some of the concepts that we're looking at right now. And then we also have 52,000 square feet of commercial space that can accommodate up to 500 workers. And this is one concept that we're looking at. And so, as I start to get into the site plan, we want to. We've studied the updated master plan. We want to honor Missoula's beauty by creating focal points with public and private activity nodes. All the private and public activity nodes will face the river. And we will be working with Parks and Rec on the extension of the trail system from where Nick's property ends. We hope to be able to create an open-air pavilions, built-up wood benches, performance platforms, and include drought-resistant landscaping. So what's the impact? We have hundreds of new jobs. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual tax and parking revenue. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to downtown. We have new opportunities for workers across a range of professions. We have new funding for local schools and infrastructure through taxes paid by the Riverfront Triangle businesses, the visitors, and the residents. And we have new sales and income for other businesses downtown and throughout the community. So the timeline, what we have accomplished so far, we've done our parking and traffic studies. We've done all of our environmental investigations, phase 1s and phase 2. We have a land use agreement that's been recorded. We have a utilities investigation that's been completed. All of the current buildings on the triangle have been remediated of asbestos, and we have just completed our phase 1 massing and yield analysis. What lies ahead? In the next coming weeks and months, we'll begin to hone in on the elevations, the materials, the colors over the next few months so we can comply with the City of Missoula's design excellence overlay. We'll complete our plain assessment this spring, or floodplain assessment this spring. We hope to have our commercial tenants secured by late summer. And, you know, depending on Nick's schedule, we anticipate the parking structure will commence sometime late summer, early fall. We'll then begin our construction drawings to commence this summer, and we'll engage our general contractor to assist with the technical aspects of the design. And we anticipate permitting and will begin sometime in March of 2021 with the construction date of summer of 2021. So one thing I just want to kind of touch on that Nick talked about that I think is really important too is the property that Nick's developing has not generated any taxes in the last 30 years. The property that Farran has, which is about 5 acres, up until 2017 was generating $5,600 a year in taxes. Because the hospital owned it, it was a nonprofit, they didn't pay taxes. You had the former Budget Travel on the corner of Broadway and Orange that was generating the tax. Beginning in 2017, we started to pay a couple $100,000, in excess of $200,000 in taxes. And, you know, when we're completely built out, just for this phase one that I just talked about, we anticipate the tax revenue that will be generated from that building will be about $565,000. So I think it's important to understand that this piece of property has been sitting there, it hasn't been developed, and underutilized, and now we have an opportunity to not only conform with the master plan, but to also generate a lot of taxes through the development of this project. Thank you.
Okay, table talk. Those of you who've been here before know the rules, but if you're new to City Club, we ask you to take 10 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, introduce yourselves if you haven't already, and then come up with one question, one succinct question. Look around the room. We might not get to everybody, but we're going to do our best, and that depends on your being succinct. On topic, just one. No long preamble, just the question. And it is to be your table's question, not your question. So you should preface, if you're the person from your table, say, our question is, not my question is. And then we have 2 people with microphones, one on either side of the room, and we'll reconvene in a few minutes. But meanwhile, discuss. Thank you very much. So it hasn't quite been 10 minutes, but we really know that we have a lot of questions in a short amount of time. So who might be ready to ask a question? Okay, and our roving mic, got Brett is there and Dave is there. So
thank you. Our question is, market rate housing is included. How about affordable rate housing in your plan?
So there will be some affordable housing. When we negotiate the land use agreement with the city, we insert a language in there that on the affordable housing, there will be a partnership between a nonprofit, the city, and the developer. So we do have that documented through the land use agreement.
Right now? We'd be interested to know from this table what would happen in the event of an economic downturn, a major one, with the current financing structure.
That's a good question. You know, once the bonds, and I say this reluctantly because my potential lenders are in the room, but once the bonds are issued, the risk falls, as with me, also with the debt that I borrow, the risk falls on us and on the lender. The city is not guaranteeing or providing any guarantees on either the parking revenue or the taxes that we pay to satisfy both those revenue bonds. So the city has no obligation once the bonds are issued and is not responsible. So from a city standpoint, The risk is that they own an event center that potentially isn't getting the kind of activity that they hoped for, and it's not driving the revenue to downtown Missoula in the manner that we hoped for. But from a financing standpoint, that risk either falls on the developer or falls on the banks if the parking revenue doesn't achieve its numbers or the tax increment isn't at the level that was anticipated.
Thank you.
Oh, you hold it. Okay. Thank you. Our table is interested in hearing from both of you a little bit more, or a little bit about any kinds of green buildings for the future, energy efficiency, renewable, thinking about embodied carbon, cement, all those kinds of things, and where that fits into this development.
Yeah, a couple points. All of the venues that Logjam operates are zero waste venues, so we have no plastic in any of our venues currently, and we compost all waste at all of our venues, so we've already complied with the zero waste initiative of the City of Missoula. We're, I think, one of the first major businesses to achieve that. And to give you a quick example, for instance, water bottles, which is a very difficult thing to address on that component, we've partnered with Phillipsburg Brewing out of their natural spring and did aluminum. That's an annual cost to Logjam about $100,000 a year, the difference between the price point of a plastic bottle and an aluminum bottle. From a construction standpoint, we definitely are going to incorporate a lot of green elements. We're going to have some green rooftops on above the spa and patio deck. The buildings won't be LEED certified buildings. Most developers will tell you these days that the LEED program is more paperwork than it is actual practical, and the cost of it don't generate the benefits. So we're not going to go for LEED buildings officially, but there will be a lot of green components in the buildings themselves. I'd also talk, without getting into a ton of detail, that the mechanical and some of the mechanical systems that we're looking at are very green-oriented, using groundwater and such, and we can have another conversation on that, but we are looking to do that as well.
And I would just add, it's something we're going to look at. We're just beginning the schematic design, but we'll be looking at all those elements also. But to Nick's point, we won't be LEED certified also for those same reasons.
You indicated that the Missoula, or that you'd be adding roughly 200+ jobs, $3.3 million in payroll to the Missoula community. Does Missoula have the capacity for those jobs in that sector with the housing, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as somebody that already employs a couple hundred people in that segment, it's a challenge for sure. The benefit right now has been to the worker in that our average wages have gone up considerably for our kitchen staff, for our serving staff, and if you want to keep good workers, you have to give them good pay. If you work over a certain number of hours a week in our organization at any level, you get benefits. We have swampers that get health benefits, swampers being cleaning staff. We have servers, bartenders, all get benefits. So those are the kinds of things that you do to retain and attract employees. But yes, our staff, I would say, is very focused on bringing those type of, being able to secure that type of workforce. And I agree with the concerns that you hear. Affordable housing is a huge issue. We could have a whole panel on that. Not being addressed at this project because it doesn't make sense on this project other than what Jim's doing on the other sites. But affordable housing is a huge issue for my staff currently, and it's something that we're very concerned about and think about.
I would just add, our unit mix, 145 of the units are either studios or one-by-one units, smaller footprints. In the studios aren't your traditional studio where you have a bed out in the living room. It's actually, we call them junior one-bedrooms. They have a 6-foot wall around the bedroom, so in a barn door, so it feels like a one-bedroom, but it's classified as a studio unit. So when we look at the unit mix, we're focused on the workforce housing aspect of it, and we think today people are more, we know they're price sensitive and not as much square footage sensitive.
I think we want to know something a lot of people are wondering. This being the largest TIF handout in the state's history, we were curious, what's next? Where do you go from here? How can we go bigger? What's next?
Not sure. When you say what next, for us, I mean, this is, I would imagine, the last venue type of development that we have in Missoula. I mean, we feel this is what the need in Missoula is right now. A lot of these concerts are currently at the Adams Center. I could give you opinions on if that's appropriate for music versus athletics, and that's a debate we could have. But yeah, what's next? I don't know. I mean, I'd caution on the TIF. I do think it's important to realize, yes, it's the biggest TIF award ever in the state of Montana, but it is also, the TIF is being used to allow the city to purchase the event center. This isn't a TIF award. If I was just a single developer building a property and I received TIF award, and then I built it and sold it a few years from now, you could argue that some of that TIF award, depending on the amount and how it was used, I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but you could argue that that goes in your pocket. This is a facility being bought with TIF proceeds by the City of Missoula. The City of Missoula will own this facility. The TIF award is not going to the hotel. So I think that's a very important distinction, that they're using this as a methodology to get a civic center at this location on the river, which it will own in the long run. So I just want clarification there, because the $16 million isn't coming to Logjam. We definitely are a beneficiary of it in that we will operate the facility, our hotel's next to the facility, but the TIF award is being used to purchase the facility by the city. And then it's leasing back to me, so it's taxable, which then helps the TIF award exist, because the taxes from the facility pay for that TIF award.
Thank you. Our question from the table is, how are you planning on tackling parking and also traffic with these events?
That's a great question, and it's something we've had a lot of conversation with the city. I mean, it's always a huge challenge with developing a parking plan for an event center that's being used 4 or 5 times. How do you decide how much parking that you build for those 4 or 5 times a month, and what do you do with that capacity once it's built? It's very similar. I give examples to think about. Whether it's a Grizz game, they have nowhere near 25,000 capacity to park a Grizz game, and I live 2 blocks from the Adams Center, and I'm very familiar with it. The baseball has many games where it has 2,000-3,000 people. There is essentially zero parking at baseball, 100 stalls. So events do create parking. The goal with us and goal with the city is we have all of this parking capacity around town that is used heavily during the day, but when the business hours are over, which is when this event center will be primarily in use, the hope is that people park all over the city of Missoula. The hope is that all of the people coming to our events go to the restaurants, go to the bars, stay at the hotels, spend their money in the community, particularly the ones that are coming from outside the community for the event. And the parking capacity will be thought of as an entire parking capacity for the downtown area. That's why I show the 1.5 and a quarter mile radius. Most of that parking capacity is within a half mile of the facility. So there is no way we could build enough parking at this location to accommodate a 3,000 to 6,000 person event. It's not possible, and it's not economically feasible under any circumstance. We will have enough 600-700 stalls if we build out the whole parking to accommodate some, but the rest of the parking capacity in the community is hopefully taking that, and hopefully that causes people to spend money in the community.
And maybe traffic impact with the right turn lane.
Yeah, traffic impact. One thing we haven't talked about is the developer is playing for a right turn lane on the corner of Broadway and Orange. And what that does is that because of the traffic that currently flows through from Broadway along front at that angled road, we're concerned that this will impact this project, and so we are putting in at developer cost a turn lane at the corner of Broadway and Orange. That also is at a cost to Jim's property. He's having to give up property to accommodate that turn lane. So we're taking some traffic mitigation, working with the Department of Transportation, working with the City of Missoula, and a tug and pull for sure, but managing that process at a cost that everybody can live with.
And I would just add, in our next phase, we will have additional parking, structured parking. Again, with the land use agreement, we can't have any surface parking, so it either has to go up or down, and it needs to be hidden. So we're probably looking at another 400 parking stalls to accommodate the entire site.
You know, one last thing I'd add, as a downtown business owner on Front Street, we're very focused on parking. We live with it every day, and our customers live with it every day.
Thank you for your presentation, mostly for the Farran Group, but also for Logjam. In the context being, as I understand it, part of Front Street is going to be vacated for the Farran Group project. Are you still financing this, at least partially, with an EB-5 visa program?
We are not at this point. With Front Street being vacated on the, I guess would be west of Owen Street, it's not just for our site, it's for the entire site. We're trying to create a district in there that, you know, brings people to that area, takes them to the parking, where people can walk over, use the trails and those types of things. But we are not using EB-5 for this project.
We're not using EB-5 for the project. We're either going to work with a group of local investors, or we're talking to one potential institution, but our strong preference is to work with all local Missoula-based investors.
So we're back at the transportation over here. What have you done to work with public transportation, particularly to and from the airport? I see that being an issue trying to get to bigger events in downtown Missoula.
I guess the short answer is nothing. We haven't had a conversation with the airport. I think it's a fair point. A lot of our customers, particularly on the Kettle House shows, which would be more applicable to these type of shows, would come from the airport. Hopefully the airport puts in better, I don't know, they're working at it. Hopefully we get better flights and access so we can bring more of those people in. But at this point we haven't had conversations with them. That's a good point.
Considering the $47 million in construction wages you stated, what are your thoughts on ensuring that local contractors will be used as much as possible and the wages being a standard to attract qualified workers?
We're absolutely committed to local workers. If you look at my design team, I don't have a single firm that working on this project that isn't a Montana-based firm, and only one is not a Missoula-based firm. So all the engineers working on this project are currently, and architects are Montana firms. I've already engaged and partnered with Doug Jackson and Jackson Construction on the project, so Jackson will be the builder. And it is, if you look at our our history in Missoula, whether it's the Wilma, the Top Hat, Plunk, the Kettle House Amphitheater, I have only used local trades in to build those buildings. So, and also because of the TIF, we're going to follow all those types of requirements that are mandated as part of the TIF process.
Our question here is about the integration of the river trail system through the project. You mentioned that you're working with Parks and Rec for that. Has there been any opportunity for public input as this city is working on a master plan for those trails going forward?
You know, I'm participating in the master plan, so I'm really aware of what they're, not the master plan, but that it's called the Blue Ribbon Committee that's working on the trails system. So we are working and integrating with that. We just aren't at the point yet where we are ready to sit down with a larger community. We just brought our landscape architect on board, a group out of Bozeman, and we're trying to find that perfect design for us, and that before we start presenting to the city, presenting to the public, but it's definitely something that we're willing to do and prepared to do.
Nick, I have a question here. I don't mean to embarrass you by this question at all. When I moved to Missoula, you could pay your bar tab with firewood across the street from the Top Hat. We've talked a lot about affordable housing, and we all care about it. Can you give me an idea of what the penthouse in your tower is going to cost, and is it going to impact my jet parking at the airport?
To answer your question, we just don't know yet. I mean, we're actually just got through our first phase of designs, and we're giving that out to our contractor, who's given our first phase of numbers tomorrow. Until I have those numbers, it's really hard for me to know what that is going to cost. I have some ballpark numbers, but I'm just not prepared to give them until I have something that's a little bit more validated from the contractor. But I can't sit here and tell you it's going to be cheap. I mean, those are, you know, upper level Riverview, Mountain View condos, and they are not affordable housing on the condo side.
We want to piggyback off of what this table said, and if it weren't for TIF funding, how would the scope of your projects both be different?
There would be no event center. I mean, it's plain and simple. The Kettle House we funded, so the Wilma, Top Hat, Kettle House have all been funded entirely with private dollars. We have not received no assistance in any kind of public financing whatsoever. At that level and at that scale, I can make those numbers work. At this level and this scale and the saturation potential of the Missoula market and how many shows that you could do a month in a facility like this, there's absolutely no way that you could make the numbers pencil. It's the reason that most of these facilities, whether you agree with these facilities or you don't agree with these facilities, that's a debate you can have. And do you think they have the economic impact that we think they have on the Missoula community or not? You can have that debate. But there's a reason they're all publicly funded. They just don't pencil on their own. The hotel, and the reason there's no public funds, those should pencil on their own, and if they don't, that's my problem and my risk. The event center would not pencil.
So our tradition is to end promptly at 1 o'clock. We thank you all for being here. I'm sorry if you didn't get your question answered. We hope you'll be back March 9 for the State of K-12 Education. And remember, you can renew or join at the $35 level until March 9. Thank you all. Go out and see some DocFest movies and have a great day. Thank you, Nick.